Value of a pre-purchase inspection on a unibody construction 190 SL made from 1955 through early part of 1963. But the unibody construction was typical of the era, found on cars like the Porsche 356. And what we're going to do with this particular video is to show you a classic example of why a pre-purchase inspection is very valuable. This particular 190 SL looks terrific from 10 feet. Client from New England brought the car down here to North Carolina for some mechanicals. He loved the way the car drove, blowing a lot of white smoke. We did leak down and compression. Compression was around 90 all the way across, and leak down was down to 20 and 30% across all four cylinders. As a result, we recommended an engine rebuild. When we put this car up on a lift to remove the motor, and that's how we do it here, there are different ways of doing it, but we disconnect the propeller shaft and drop the transmission and then pull the engine out as an entire piece. Takes us about an hour that way. We found riveted and undercoated to the entire underside this piece of sheet metal. So the entire underside of the car, from the transmission all the way back to the trailing arms, was covered, and then nicely covered over with Bondo and painted black. I'm going to put this car up on a lift in a couple of minutes and show you what we discovered. I would encourage you to watch this video all the way through. You will not believe, once we drop that piece of metal, what we discovered. Something that you'll only see once. Before doing that, though, I'm going to show you a couple of other cars currently completed to explain and show you what we mean by the unibody construction and why it is so important to the overall structure of a 190 SL. This is a excellent example of a very solid 190 SL being prepared to be restored, and Andy will point to the intermediate frame rail, solid all the way across. That runs from front to back, right up to the wishbone in the front and back to the trailing arm in the back. That provides side structure. It's about 18 gauge steel, and then on top of that is the top frame rail. It looks like a railroad track, but it runs on top of that intermediate the same distance from the front to the rear. And then on the bottom of that, which you can't see, we'll show you on another car, is what we call the frame rail cap. That's to cap that structure off, and it's a point where your floorboards can attach to. Then in the center, we have about a 12 gauge, 12 gauge quarter-inch steel structure that runs from the very back all the way to the front, and it provides the main center support. We call it the spline of a unibody construction, and in this particular case a 190 SL. In the silver car that I just referred to, at the bottom of that you can actually reach your hand through. It's so entirely rusted out. The car obviously sat in water. Here you can see where the frame rails, upper and lower, and cap and the spline all come together to provide the center structure. Here's the bottom of a restored 190 SL, and Andy will point to the end of that spline. You can see the thickness of the metal, and that provides the spine or center structure of a unibody all the way down. And of course we saw the top on the other car we just showed. Then your floor pans are attached to your frame rail over here, frame rail cap. It's the cap, and then on top of that is the intermediate and then the top cap, and then that runs all the way up to the front, turns in and ties into the spline where we showed you on the previous video. We'll now turn to the silver car, take this car off and put the silver car on the lift, and you will not believe when we remove that piece of metal what actually happens and what they did to the undercarriage of that car, and why it's so important to have somebody knowledgeable of these cars and knowing how they're constructed, be able to evaluate it before you purchase the car and invest money. That car that we will show you, the silver car from New England, is basically unrestorable. One of the first, not the first, but one of the few I've seen over the years. So here we are zipping it out.
Alright, now that we got it loose back here, I'm just going to run up each side and we'll keep pulling it down as we go. Let's just put it.
So we're looking at the center tunnel, probably 11 gauge, and you can see that the center tunnel, which is the main support, is completely gone. This is your propeller shaft, and here I'm touching the propeller shaft. See it right up there.
And then this is the floor pan that somebody dropped in instead of having it welded in to the base. This is where the actual bottom of your car should be, right across here. And it's so far gone they had nothing to tie into, so they welded it to the outer perimeter of the chassis is what happened. And as you can see up in here, this is what used to be what's called your intermediate frame rail. You got 3 layers of frame rail on this car. You've got a cap, an intermediate, and then the bottom cap is what your floor pan's attached to. So what they did was, it looks like somebody with a torch cut the intermediate rail out, didn't even finish it all the way back. They just dropped a piece of steel in here to tie that plate that was on the bottom into along in here. And then the intermediate frame cap got a slight patch back here, and we've got bolts that come through in here for something. Look at that. See that? Right, as we walk around the car, that's basically what we see. There is no floor left to the car back here, and all the supporting frame rails. Once again, in here, this intermediate frame is gone. The only thing that is really left is what's called the frame cap, and it's rusted through. So
Not the frame cap, the top
of the frame.
Yeah.
All 3 layers of the frame rail.
Yeah.
I doubt that the car, see, here's another piece that somebody welded on to try and support. Look, there's a piece of angle iron shoved up in here.
Right.
Yeah.
See that?
Now, to give you a point of reference, 11 gauge center tunnel is about a 1/4 inch piece of steel.
Yeah, it used to be thicker than that.
Yeah.
Right there.
How does a piece of 1/4 inch steel rust like this unless this car was sitting in water?
And here's a piece off somebody's swing set that's galvanized that they stuck in here when they did this little repair.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The other issue that we've got is this. All the forward frame rails and the intermediate frame rails.
Yeah, they're gone. That's all Bondo right here. Look at the cup.
Wow. Wow.
That's a hobo restoration like the other one.
corrosion here is probably
Clearly the most significant we've ever
yeah,
seen.
probably one of the most significant ones we've seen.
Look at the piece that was on the top and the rust that fell out of the job. Coco was not underneath the floorboard. She came with me.
It looks exactly.
By the way, Coco used to be white before we started. You can see what happened.